So what you don't want to be doing is turning your hips. Turning your hips was something that's been taught for years now, I don't know, a few decades now. But one of the things we found, or I found with learning to sort of turn the hips, was it gave me a wrong concept of what my body should actually be doing in an athletic movement. So what I mean by that is when I was trying to learn to turn my hips and rotate and turn, it wasn't really getting me to move in a very dynamic movement. And the pattern was wrong, and it got my sequencing out. And I was learning to move the hip forward. So when I was turning or rotating, what I used to find was I was always taught many years ago that you had to keep the right knee still and you had to keep the hip as reduced down in turn as possible, so you was building coil and stretch. But what used to happen was either my right hip would stop and I'd pivot around that, so my left hip was actually moving forward, and that's what I thought was turning, because I was trying to keep this still and I was turning. And then this meant that I was forever getting closer to the ball, or my pelvis was forever moving up into the shot, and it was putting me off balance. I've also had an issue where for me on my follow through, my left hip stalls and my right hip pivots and comes forward. I've always had a tendency to be a little bit off my right foot, and I've had a tendency to sort of turn and get closer to the ball, which has always caused me to come in, get closer, dump the club, and have a bit of a flicky action through the shot. So it was about changing my task in my head, and I was watching a video of Mike Malaska's, and he was talking about what they call straight line forces and how the body actually should work, which is that it works in straight lines. So having the concept of, you know, if I was to walk backwards, for example, my hip would go, I'll step backwards, my hip would go back. It looks like I've turned, but I haven't. It's just because the pelvis works that way. It's the same way this way. It's the same if I went forward. My hip goes forward, or my leg goes forward, and the hip looks like it's turned, and it hasn't though. Okay, so when I'm doing my golf swing now, I have a tendency to feel as though that my right hip, I work in straight lines. So my right hip goes back, I move to my left side, and then my left hip goes back, and this keeps me in perfect posture on the way through. I'm not forever firing up, and I'm able to use the ground, which is important, which we're learning more and more now, to use the ground better when I'm actually swinging. I can push back, get it into my heels, I can transfer it easily, draw on the swing, push into this side, and then push away and load my left leg better. So try to think of, in the golf swing, of the right hip going back and it's staying there to a certain degree, and on the downswing I shift to my left, and then I push my left hip back via my left leg. So on the follow through, as I swing back, I'm loading into this left side, and then I'm actually using the left leg to push the left hip back. As you can see from this position here, if I'm in here and I get myself into by just pushing the hip back, you can see I have an appearance of actually rotating my hips through the shot. I can actually go quite a long way. You see these people saying about how you've got to be flexible to get here. I'm not the most flexible person in the world. You can ask my physio, but I'm actually able to push myself back and get myself into that position where you feel like you should be in a good hitting position. But I've done that by just pushing the hip back. I haven't done it by turning. I've done it by pushing back, and that pushing back action, or that feeling of pushing away, which I'll do a video on as well about how you use momentum, but pushing the hips back is actually a more powerful movement than actually turning the hips. Okay, that's how you create speed and power, is through the pushing away, not the spinning or turning. And again, I'll do a video at some point on how to do more power through the shot and how speed comes. So don't turn the hips, push them back, straight line forces, back on the backswing and back on the through swing.